and we're now early on in the Big Ten, and the Hawkeyes with Kirk Ferentz are on the clock.
Yeah, so Iowa, the Hawkeyes have been pretty steady eddies. We're taking a look around the Big Ten, obviously, and I guess just starting right. Wasn't Illinois like the first team that we did? Or
yeah, Illinois, first. Indiana.
Yeah, so we're chugging on along here, but not out of the eyes just yet. The Hawkeyes, obviously, for those who have tuned in previously to these, just look arounds. This is not full-on, full-fledged breakdown and predictions and all of that. It's just a look at the schedule. So with that in mind, it's a year where Iowa should win 10 games. If history since 2019, which is a short sample size, I know, but if it's any indication, because they won 10 in 2019, 6 the following year, 10 in 21, 8 the following year, 10 in 23, 8 the following year.
No.
So 10, right? This year, you got to win 10 games to keep the streak alive and keep it going. But they've been steady eddies under Kirk Ferentz for a long time now. Have not missed a bowl game since 2012, which is a terrific feat as well. And just real curious of where they fit in the big picture, especially when you got other teams that emerged like Indiana last year, or even in Illinois. And then you've got all of the new schools that came in and started making impacts right away, like in Oregon. So, what is in store for the Hawkeyes? We don't know, but we do know what order they will be mowing through the schedule. And so let's start off with that and get into this Iowa 2025 schedule. And things start off on August the 30th at home against Albany, who we've seen a couple of times around here. I think they made a trip here once or twice. So Albany, Great Danes, if you weren't aware, and I'm sure you are aware, regardless of whether you knew the mascot or not, this will be a win for Iowa to open up the season on August the 30th. So Albany right out of the gates, and then doesn't take long to get right into the heat of things as the annual Cy-Hawk battle on September the 26th, this year's contest in Ames, Iowa. And you know what? Iowa State and Iowa, for the longest time, Iowa has dominated this series. That was a big thing kind of hanging over Matt Campbell's head even a little bit. But Iowa State with the big win last year. And I don't know, this ought to be a hell of a game because it's usually a hell of a game. The last few contests have been very close down to the wire type of games. And so it's pretty one-sided historically, but it's definitely more interesting than it's probably ever been, I would think, in its history, that series. So Iowa, then you will turn around, keep the schedule going into week number 3, and you are back at home as you play host to UMass. So bare minimum, you're 2-1. Like, not even a question about that. You're going to beat Albany. You're going to beat UMass, or things have gone hellaciously wrong for Kirk Ferentz and company. Then Saturday, September the 20th, you've got Rutgers on the road, opening up your Big Ten schedule there. And then to close out the month of September, still no breaks as of yet, but you're about to get one after this game closes out September, and that is Iowa back at home, welcoming in the Indiana Hoosiers and Curt Cignetti. So that ought to be a hell of a game that up until last year probably broadly didn't get a lot of attention, but based on what Indiana did last year and based on just the every year respect of Iowa, it might be a bit of a fun contest there. So we'll stop because that ends the month of September, but it also leads into the first bye week for the Hawkeyes. So they have 5 games in a row to start off with. Albany at home, Iowa State on the road, UMass at home, Rutgers on the road, Indiana at home. Are you noticing a pattern here? It's back and forth those first 5 weeks as well, and that will continue on for at least one more game.
Protect your online privacy with Nord VPN. Browse securely, access content from anywhere, and keep your data safe with military-grade encryption. Whether at home or on the go, NordVPN ensures your digital freedom. Stay secure. Download NordVPN today at nordvpn.com. That's NORDVPN.com.
So any thoughts on the first handful of games as we get into the month of October here?
I'm going to say something you've never heard me say before, and you may never hear me say after this. I don't know what's going to happen in 2026. But with Iowa actually prioritizing the quarterback position for the first time, at least in my lifetime, and bringing in a guy like Mark.
Since Chuck Long?
Yeah. So, like Mark Gronowski,
yeah.
I'm very excited to watch them. this year in C, because he was very accomplished, at the FCS level, won a ton of games, and steps into a system that is, especially the way that they're going to run it, that is a very easy transition from FCS to FBS, especially to the Big Ten and big time college football. So, I think this team, is very likely 3-2 and 4-1 out of the first 5. I don't think that they'll be 5-0. I actually do think Iowa State, even though that game is always close, is probably better than them top to bottom right now, and that game is in Ames. But Iowa State historically has not had the run of that series. Last year, they were way better than Iowa.
Yeah, it's like 47 and 20-something. Yeah.
A monstrous comeback to win it. So in the second half, which they did. But, yeah, I think you're 4-1 out of that of those first 5 easy.
Yeah,
or 3-2. Yeah, at worst. I think Indiana.
You've had Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, and now the question is going to be who's that next one that makes a run at them? If any, Oregon, is it going to be USC? But with Indiana, you mentioned earlier Illinois. Iowa's been that kind of in that top upper tier, but can they hold on to it? And that Indiana game will be interesting to see if they start to slip. And then Wisconsin's another school that has been down recently with the coaching changes, with who they are. I know that's who they're going to play next.
Yeah, so let's get into that stretch. It'll be a 3-game stretch after 5 to start the year. Come back from the bye week, and the back and forth home and away continues for one more week. So the first 6 weeks of the season will be home and away. Every other week, but it will end after this game on the road. Camp Randall, Madison, Wisconsin, the Badgers on Saturday, October the 11th. Then they come back and will have back-to-back home games before their second bye. Penn State, they're at Kinnick on October the 18th, and then Minnesota the following week on the 25th, and that leads them into their second and final bye, which will include a 4-game stretch to finish the season. So 5-3-4 for those keeping track at home of all the various combinations we've had through the 30 or so teams we've done this for. 5-3-4, I'm sure we've hit on that at some point. It's more unique when we've seen like the 6-5-1 or something like that. So this is not totally balanced, but it's not anything all that crazy. But for just the 3-game stretch, that's not too shabby at Wisconsin, Penn State, Minnesota at home there.
No kidding. Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah, and look, if you can knock off Penn State at home, you're going to start, getting some CFP vibes at that point. I don't think that happens until if and when they do that. But Minnesota and I think Wisconsin will be a little bit better than they were last year. I think Minnesota is probably going to be about the same. They both have good coaches, but I don't think they're going to, all that. And then you will see. But if you can get Penn State, obviously, is the second really big one. I'm not ready to put Indiana in there yet. Again, and not say that they're not a one-year wonder, but I do think that Penn State, Iowa State in the first 7 weeks, 8 weeks of the season, that'll show you where Iowa really is.
Which that means they cannot, and we don't know, lose a game they're not supposed to lose. We don't know who these teams are until we kind of get 2 or 3 weeks into the season, but they surely can't afford to fall Indiana, Wisconsin, because otherwise, you're right, with the Iowa State and Penn State on the schedule the first half of the year, it won't end well.
So going into the third and final phase, they have Saturday, November the 1st off. After that Minnesota game, and then the Final Four, it'll be Oregon. They're in Iowa City. The Ducks come to town on November the 8th. The following week, they'll travel to Los Angeles to take on USC. Then it's back at home against Michigan State on November the 22nd. And then their only non-Saturday game of the year on Friday, November the 28th, the final game of the regular season. And the conclusion of this 4-game stretch, they will be on the road at Nebraska. So Memorial Stadium on a Friday night. I seen that. I saw that in person. Illinois beat them in Lincoln on a Friday night in our first and only trip to Nebraska. So Nebraska back on a Friday night. Hopefully for their sake, they have better luck. For Iowa's sake, hopefully they don't. They go and pull in Illinois and win a thriller maybe, but that is how it will close out. Oregon at USC, Michigan State at Nebraska. And I know we talk about how beneficial Texas and eventually Oklahoma as well in a football sense will be for the SEC. And when you've already had all these other brands, Alabama and Georgia and LSU and so on and so forth, then you add Texas and Oklahoma, like that's really legit. It's really, really a deep league. But I mean, the Big Ten got off from the expansion phase as well as anybody, I feel like, as well, because what was just every year is like, all right, Ohio State and then probably Michigan and probably Penn State. And then there's years where it's been Michigan State, or there's years where it's been Iowa, or there's years where it's been Wisconsin. But now you've got Indiana, who's suddenly at least of interest. And then any of the other schools I just mentioned, the combination of a Wisconsin or an Iowa or a Michigan State could be good in any given year. But then you throw freaking Oregon into here. Mm-hmm. And then the fact that the other three haven't really been much to write home about, but Washington's still interesting. They've kind of just fallen off the map since the playoff. It feels like in a way.
Well, that was a really good team too, but they got a hell of a football history.
But it wasn't that long ago, and you got to give Jed Fish some time. They're still Washington. UCLA, they're at least interesting because of Nico now at this point, so you're watching the car wreck in real time. And then USC, people love to watch Lincoln Riley lose, and maybe they'll be pretty good. We don't really know there, but you throw that in the mix, and just Oregon alone really just adds an oomph to this that I don't feel like the conference had before, when it felt like you were talking about pretty much the same three teams every single year. It's like Penn State, Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, Ohio State, Michigan. And then you had the others, like I said, but to throw Oregon in the mix, it really does kind of shake things up. And if Washington or USC can pull their weight as well, then you've got a really deep and fun and interesting league. But there you go. There's Iowa. They've got a 5-3-4 schedule, 7 games at home, 5 games on the road. And one reason why I think we'll never see the full, unless, I mean, I could see how the Super League would manage this, because just everything would be drastically different. But man, all these teams pretty much enjoying 7 home games and 5 road games, like nearly all of them. And it's like, that's not sustainable.
8, yeah.
If you go to where you trim all the fat and you don't have Albany that can come to town, you're looking at 6-6, as far as a schedule split goes. But not the full listing here, just the notable teams off the top of my head. They don't play Michigan. They don't play Ohio State. So they don't play either one of those two. They don't play UCLA. They don't play Washington. They don't play Illinois. That was just some off the top of my head that weren't on the schedule. So I think all of those are to some degree notable. Obviously, Michigan, Ohio State especially. And so, yeah, there you go. There's an Iowa schedule. Any final thoughts?
I'll get a couple of chat room comments that are really good, but go ahead.
I think the back 3 are very intriguing, because by that time we'll know, is Lincoln Riley, has he turned into the kind of coach that he is a cook? Is Jonathan Smith year 2 at Michigan State? What does that team look like?
You hear nothing about them, do you?
Yeah, and he might like it that way right now, because they haven't done anything. And then to end the season in Lincoln,
don't stop.
But what
they've won 10 of the last 12 against Nebraska.
Yeah, but
some of the most excruciating ways, dumbest ways to lose a game.
And there's also not been a Dylan Raiola in year 2.
Well, there was last year.
Man, he was blinged out at Monday Night Raw the other night, boy. He was there front row, right behind the announcers with Matt Rule and another player whose name's escaping me at the moment. And all I could see is when the 2 players stood up, was just the bling shining on those cameras. Matt Rule was having a ball. They were living it up behind the announcers table there. So
get rid of the bling and win.
But yeah, Paul, exactly. But what does that look like? Because the back 3 are all in really interesting transitional phases right now. And look, Oregon's not. I mean, but they're going to have a new quarterback this year, so that could be something.
They're
all capable of being
unbelievable.
They're all capable of being really good teams. Yeah. Like if historically. So if USC and Michigan State and Nebraska can somehow find a spark, then you're looking at almost a murderer's row of the final month of the season, because Oregon will be good. Like, that's not a question mark. But yeah, how good is USC? How good's Michigan State? How good's Nebraska? And 2 of those are trips. I mean, you're going to LA and you're going to Lincoln. So yeah, what were you going to say?
No, I'm just saying they've won 10 of the last 12. Here's Fong Wei Reldman in the chat room. Yeah, Iowa usually wins their 3 non-conference, except occasionally a loss to Iowa State, and they've kind of run that series for a long time, losing though I think 2 of the last 3. Then they beat at least 3 conference passes, nothing special. But they've been able to get to that 10-2, as you've mentioned, and even go to the Rose Bowl occasionally. Somebody brought up they had a quarterback from Baytown. It was Drew Tate. Somebody asked in that chat room, a former really great high school player. Drew Tate was there for quite some time. Paxton, whoever wins Iowa and Nebraska will end up at number 25, at least at the end of the weekend in that poll.
Yeah, that'll be a Friday game there. Lining up right with the end of November and Thanksgiving and all of that. So that ought to be a fun game with, some potential ramifications. We'll see. I know we've got the ultimate pessimist here for Nebraska football, so there's not like good vibes when they're brought up around here.
There are millions of us.
They do have the quarterback, and we'll see what Matt Rule's got cooking. Typically by year 3, he's starting to sizzle.
Always up. He always does. He jumps up.
Historically, he does. But I mean, there's good odds that somebody out of USC, Michigan, Nebraska will be pretty good, you would think, or pretty formidable. So, that final month could be sketchy or not. Or we're here talking about how much all these traditional names aren't very good, and Iowa coasted to the 10 wins or whatever once again. But, the pattern since 2019's 10 wins and then like 8 and then 10 and so on. And so they're in line for 10 again. Do you see 10 wins on this schedule? I don't. I don't think that pattern's going to hold. But I do think that there's – an 8-win season, something like that, 7 wins, something like that is probably where I would fall just in the on-paper exercise right now.